Welcome back. Today we're looking at a piece on the renewed Cambodia-Thailand border conflict, specifically the breakdown of recent ceasefire agreements.
And it's a deeply researched analysis, but we found three key areas where we think a shift in focus could really elevate its impact.
Let's jump right into the first one.
Okay, so the material does a great job detailing the underlying nationalist drivers of the conflict.
Uh-huh.
But the immediate connection between Thailand's domestic politics and the public rejection of international mediation, it could be much stronger.
So you're saying domestic politics didn't just allow the ceasefire to fail?
I'm saying domestic politics actively demanded it.
Right.
The analysis correctly notes that Prime Minister Anutin dissolved parliament for snap elections. We all know leaders use nationalism for support.
Of course.
But the rejection of Trump's December 12th ceasefire claim, right now it's treated as a sort of predictable reaction.
Instead of what it really was.
Exactly. A highly calculated political catalyst.
I see the missing link there. The analysis has all the pieces but doesn't fully connect the timing of the election to the collapse of the ceasefire itself.
Yes. The diplomatic breakdown, when you look at the chronology, it almost seems like a necessary part of a political survival strategy.
That's where the real power of the analysis could be.
So the suggestion is to recenter the narrative a bit, show explicitly how Anutin's need to project this uncompromising strength ahead of the election makes any negotiated truce, well, it makes it strategically impossible for him.
He just can't afford to look like he's bending to U.S. pressure.
Not at all. And with that framing, the rejection of the truce stops being a diplomatic failure.
And it becomes an intentional success for his domestic campaign. That completely flips the script.
It really does. It makes domestic politics the primary engine of the breakdown.
So, for a concrete example?
You'd want to explicitly link Anutin's public denial, his flat statement that Thailand never agreed to cease all shooting.
Right.
You link that directly to his need to solidify his nationalist base before the election.
So, it's not just him correcting the record for Washington, it's campaign messaging?
It's the centerpiece of his campaign messaging, a performance of sovereignty.
Okay, so you could also frame his follow-up statement, the one about continuing military actions until it felt no more harm and threats.
You frame that not just as simple retaliation,
but as perfect domestic electioneering. It's a stark contrast to Trump claiming a deal was done.
and a great way to structure this is chronologically. Show the reader the sequence. First, the Thai PM dissolves parliament.
Then he publicly and very aggressively dismisses Trump's claims.
And the domestic political timeline becomes the clear driver for everything that follows. The military action, the diplomatic rejection. It's much sharper.
It really is. The whole conflict becomes a case study in how nationalism can just trump international stability when an election is on the line.
And that leads us perfectly into the geopolitical angle, especially Washington's role.
Which is our second critique.
Exactly. The analysis of U.S. tariff diplomacy is compelling, but the strategic takeaway about its limitations could be sharpened significantly.
I see that. The material describes how using tariff relief as leverage worked for the July ceasefire, but then just completely failed by December.
It notes the risk of the U.S. being seen as transactional.
But it falls a little short in generalizing why that economic pressure failed so spectacularly when things flared up again.
Right. Is the connection between economic threats and peace fully interrogated?
I mean, we're talking about a conflict rooted in centuries of history, territorial claims.
And hugely important sites like Preah Vihar.
Exactly. If you only focus on trade metrics, you risk missing the very nature of the sovereignty dispute.
You can't overcome that kind of deep emotional nationalism with short-term economic incentives. Especially, as we just said, when the leaders are politically incentivized to fight. That's the core of it. So the suggestion here is to use the Thai PM's explicit dismissal of those tariff threats to draw a much bigger conclusion.
Which is?
That coercive economic leverage is, well, fundamentally inadequate, maybe even counterproductive, when it's up against these deeply emotional issues of national sovereignty.
We need to spotlight that moment of dismissal.
Absolutely. And there's a fantastic concrete example right there in the source material. You directly contrast the U.S. goal, peace through tariff pressure, with Anutin's public rebuttal.
The quote?
The quote, "I no longer care about trade negotiations. If we can't sell to this country, we'll find others.
That's just a stunning declaration of economic independence. It's the perfect anchor for the argument.
It is. It shows that the nationalist incentive just completely outweighed any potential economic penalty. It's the hard limit of transactional diplomacy on full display.
And that failure becomes even more significant when you contrast it with how other regional powers are operating.
You could use this to pivot to China's approach, which is so different.
The material mentions China's role, and it's a crucial point. Beijing isn't using tariffs as a stick.
Not at all. It's offering deep structural engagement. You have the Belt and Road Initiative, massive infrastructure financing.
The Kunming-Bangkok Railway, the potential Kra Canal project.
All of these things position China as the most dependable partner. It's long-term investment, not short-term coercion.
So when a leader like Anutin pushes back against the U.S., China is right there offering certainty and growth, not conditionality.
Highlighting that contrast elevates the entire analysis. It stops being just a report on a failed truce.
And it becomes a critique of competing diplomatic strategies in Southeast Asia, a real case study.
It shows that in these kinds of disputes, the power of development and, dependency can outweigh the power of economic coercion.
Which sets us up perfectly for the third and final critique.
This one is about maximizing the so what of the whole conflict.
Right. To really elevate the significance for a global audience, the human and cultural impact has to be moved from the margins to the very center of the discussion.
The piece does a great job laying out the geopolitical threats, the risks to the Gulf of Siam, the sea lines of communication, the SLOCs, the Mekong, supply chains.
All essential things. But the weakness is that the human fallout, the mass displacement, the damage to heritage sites, it's all treated as a secondary detail.
Almost like an appendix to the more serious commercial problems.
And we think that hierarchy needs to be flipped.
We need to make the reader feel the gravity of this, not just calculate its economic cost. This is an immediate, unfolding catastrophe for the people and the history of the region.
So the suggestion is to use the shocking scale of that human suffering to actually amplify the geopolitical stakes.
Instead of leading with stability metrics, you anchor the analysis in the human tragedy.
Absolutely. When you're discussing the instability, you pivot immediately to the displacement numbers.
Up to 600,000 people?
It's a staggering figure. It makes the crisis immediately palpable to any reader anywhere in the world. It's not a skirmish anymore, it's a regional emergency.
And then there's the cultural element. You have to give prominence to the UNESCO warnings.
Remind the reader that the clashes are directly threatening the World Heritage-listed Preah Vihear Temple.
A site whose ownership is at the very core of this dispute to begin with.
It's the emotional heart of the conflict. This isn't just a security issue, it's the potential for irreversible cultural loss. And the material mentions other sites are at risk too.
Prasat Tamwen Tom, Prasat Takrabe. Yes, the audience has to understand that what's being destroyed can never be replaced.
And we shouldn't shy away from the reality of the fighting itself. That's what demonstrates the vulnerability of the whole region.
You mentioned Cambodia's claim that Thailand used F-16s to drop bombs.
And you detail the reports of imprecise Cambodian BM-21 rockets hitting civilian areas in Thailand.
Using that specific, graphic detail, bombs, rockets hitting civilian zones, it just underscores the human cost.
It ties that cost directly to the geopolitical instability and makes it clear this isn't some contained border incident.
It's a crisis that threatens regional order and cultural memory. By leading with the displaced people and the endangered heritage, you hook the reader emotionally.
And then you explain the global relevance using the geopolitical risks. It just massively elevates the urgency.
Exactly.
This is clearly a deeply researched and very rich piece of analysis. The level of detail on the politics and the diplomacy is already impressive.
It is. The material is robust, and it's really just ready for that final refinement to maximize its impact.
So, to summarize the actionable suggestions.
Go ahead.
First, clarify that causal link between Thai domestic politics and the diplomatic failure by focusing on the chronology of the snap election.
Second, use that Anutin quote about tariffs as the definitive pivot point for a sharp critique of course of diplomacy in these kinds of nationalistic disputes.
And finally, bring those huge displacement figures and the UNESCO warnings right to the forefront to amplify the significance for a global audience.
These are all really targeted changes that we think will transform the work from a strong report into a truly definitive strategic analysis. We genuinely want to see it reach its full potential.
We really look forward to seeing the revised version. Please feel free to submit this material back to us for a future critique after you've implemented these changes. Until next time.